Hey guys, so we did some interviews, a set of interviews a while back. We kind of held on to them for a minute because of the news that we're about to share with you, but we wanted to do a video publicly, on our social media accounts, letting you know what happened and what transpired. So
the videos that you're about to see with Lunch Break and Doug Brignole, the story about his life, and then Muscle Matters with Doug Brignole, were filmed on October 10th. And Doug passed away on October 13th, found by his maid that morning. The medical examiner's coroner report said it was from COVID-19 infection. So we just wanted to let you guys know that before you watch the video that there was some things that happened. It's the first time it's ever happened to us because we've been on the air for 3 seasons, so that's almost 3 years, and there's always the first. So we wanted to bring that to the audience before that.
Hope you enjoy the interviews.
Hey, welcome to Lunch Break. We are so excited to have you tune in with us. Thank you, Mike Harvey, for just being the co-host today.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Well, after the last show, Mike, you only have one job.
I do.
Yeah.
I did it.
We're going to make a pay cut. That's what we're going to do.
Make a pay cut.
We always do this to each other, Doug. But we had shot a show earlier.
Make a pay cut with you.
You could do that.
Can I?
Yeah, you can.
I don't know if I can.
I'm a volunteer. You can fire me if you want. But we're here with Doug Brignole. Now, am I pronouncing that right, Doug?
You are. I mean... are you pronouncing it the way my ancestors would pronounce it? No.
How would they pronounce it?
But it's a French name, so they would say Brignole.
Oh no, I can't do that.
Brignole?
Right. So even if you weren't going to do the French R, you would still say Brignole. or Brignole.
I got
But why it ends in E with an E sound would be like saying, why is Sylvester Stallone's name not end in Stallone?
Yeah. Well, Mike knows
right.
that I always...
So, I mean, theoretically, it should be Brignole, but it's right to say Brignole because that's what it's always been since I was a child.
Yeah.
That's what I know, and that's what I respond to, so it's fine.
Mike knows I mispronounce names.
Well, you got a good excuse.
Yeah, I do. So we're here today, and Doug Brignole has a great story. I've known Doug. I used to look across the magazine pages at Doug because I think we were competing in the 80s. So Doug is a 37-year veteran of the fitness industry.
43-year veteran.
Well, okay, so I got an old article. That's right, 43.
You did have an old bio, yeah.
40, Mr. California, 43. Mr. America, and Mr. Universe. That's impressive. I love that. And it's 2 Mr. Universes. I love that. And age 16 to 52, competitive, and
59.
Former gym owner, author, lecturer, fitness TV host, personal trainer, and he writes. Are you still writing for Iron Man, Doug?
Well, Iron Man kind of doesn't exist anymore.
Well, did they?
I mean, at least not the way it did. I used to write for John Balick.
Yeah.
And John Balick doesn't own the magazine anymore. He sold it.
Did they sell it
and
to
I think the guy
natural?
who bought it.
Did they sell to a natural bodybuilding organization?
Well, they sold to a guy and his wife who was a cosmetic surgeon, and their goal seemed to turn it into more of a men's magazine with some muscle, additions. But they wanted to talk about fashion. They wanted to talk about cars. They wanted to talk about boxing. Almost like an Esquire magazine.
I gotcha.
And it didn't work.
Yep, I love it. And you also have part of an iPad app where you give tips on biomechanics. And you've been certified by the American College of Sports Medicine and American Council of Exercise. That's quite a resume, Doug. You're one of you're there again. Doug's the first bodybuilding friend that I've had on here. I remember going down and you were competing in Lonnie Teeper's show, and I told you this, Doug. because my friend Mike here knows this about me. You inspired me to, and I think I told you that, you inspired me to start exercising again. Just watching the shape that Doug had brought himself in on that contest, and you won the overall, I believe, at that contest, and went on to do amazing things that year. But it inspired me to train again, because I've been up and down through the years. So Doug, you are inspirational. Even to this day, I look at you and I see those veins. I'm like, holy smokes, what do I need to do? I'll talk to our next host on Muscle Matters about that. So you've written 2 books, to your credit. $1 Million Muscle. You were the co-author of that one, and you were The Physics of Resistance Exercise. I love those things. I love the fact that when I see your stuff, I saw you perform an squat exercise using cables, and I thought, holy smokes, I think I could do that again if I did it the way Doug did. And I did it, and I even told Mike I'm squatting again, because just your simple exercise.
That's cool.
Give us your back history, Doug, from your youth to being a gym owner to being a competitive athlete, which, wow, I don't know how you balance those two. You've had amazing athletes in your gym. I'm kind of envious of some of I've met a lot of people, but I never met Bill Pearl. And being a gym owner in Pasadena. Give a little history and background of how you got in it and where it took you.
Well, when I was about 14 years old, I was in junior high school, and I was very skinny, and I wanted to gain weight. And I was talking with my junior high coach, and I told him that I was trying to gain weight, and I was eating a lot of food that is known to gain weight, like candy bars. And he said, well, you don't want that kind of weight. You might not even be able to gain that kind of weight if you have a fast metabolism, but it's not healthy anyway. The only kind of weight that you want that looks good, that's healthy, is muscle weight, and you need to weight train for that. So I went out and I got one of these, plastic cement-filled sets, these barbells, and my mom let me put it in the living room, and I got the booklet and I started, using that. But I knew that this wasn't enough, right? Because I was reading the magazines and I could see that bodybuilders were using equipment, cable machines and leg extension machines and things. So I went to the local health club. It said Pasadena Health Club, but it was Bill Pearl's gym. Oh. And so I didn't know who Bill Pearl was. I didn't know he was a 4-time Mr. Universe winner. He was just the guy who owned the gym like 4 or 5 blocks from where I lived. I was just lucky. So I walked there. And I was speaking to him, and of course, bodybuilders don't look like bodybuilders in the off season usually. Yeah. So he looked fit, even though behind him there was this velvet painting of him, in one of his classic, Mr. Universe poses, and there were trophies everywhere. I didn't know there was a connection. So I said, Mr. Pearl, I'd like to work out here. And he said, well, how old are you? I said, I'm 14. He said, well, we don't really let people start here until they're 50. Can you come back when you're 15?
Oh, really?
So I said, sure, I'll come back when I'm 15. So I came back a year later and still worked out at home. And then at 15, he said, okay, fine, that's $185 for the year. And I said, well, I don't have $185. And my mother, is a low-income wage earner. So is there a way that I can work for you in exchange for membership, like janitorial work? And he goes, sure, why not? I mean, I'll still pay you, but yeah, come in every Saturday and help me, scrub the showers and sweep the parking lot and polish the chrome machines. And, you can work for, 5-6 hours and I'll pay you and you'll earn your week's membership in advance. So that's how I started. Then, soon I discovered, this guy's a 4-time Mr. Universe winner. And I also discovered that Lou Ferrigno goes in there now and then. Chris Dickerson goes in there now and then. Dennis Chinorino goes in there. Jim Morris goes in there. So little by little, I was meeting all these people. And before long, I was actually working out with Jim Morris. We were training partners for about 3 years. So I had some pretty good instruction.
You did.
But I have to say, in light of the book, The Physics of Resistance Exercise, I've always been a free thinker and a skeptic. In other words, I've never just believed that just because someone has a bodybuilding title, that they know everything about exercise science. So I would listen to my body and I would question things. So when I would do upright rows, I would say, this doesn't feel right. Parallel bar dips don't feel right. Deadlifts don't feel right. Overhead press doesn't feel right. You know, this feels right, and this feels right, and this feels right. So what is it that makes one exercise feel right? Full range of motion, full contraction, no joint distortion, and one not, right? So I started curiously looking into anatomy, and you know, I soon started attending cadaver dissections.
Oh, really?
And buying anatomy books and figuring out, you know, what a side deltoid does, where the origin and insertion is. And as soon as you do that, you can figure out an awful lot about what makes sense or not as an exercise for that muscle. Like for example, if you look at the abs and you're doing leg raises and you realize, you see right there on the anatomy chart that the abs don't even connect to the legs. You say, well, why am I moving a limb that isn't even connected to the muscle I'm trying to work? The same is true for the middle trapezius. The middle trapezius starts at the spine, goes out to the outer edge of the scapula, the shoulder blade. It doesn't even connect to the arm. So when you're rowing, if you're not pulling the shoulders back and forth, that muscle isn't even working. And most people do rowing like this. They keep their shoulders forward. So all of a sudden I started realizing there's a lot of mistakes that bodybuilders are doing. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that a lot of bodybuilders don't even know the names of the muscles they're working.
I would agree with you, Doug.
So I was just going through this process, and as a result of that, you know, I think sometimes I got Bill a little bit upset because I would ask him questions, he would give me an answer, and then I wouldn't follow his advice.
Was he one of the ones that didn't know what the muscles were, Doug?
Well, you know, Bill Pearl was a traditionalist.
Yeah, he was.
He was a big bone guy who grew rather easily, endomorph, and he believed in the compound lifts, and because that's what the dogma was at the time.
That's old school. That's
yeah. So then I continued working out at Bill Pearl's gym, for about 8 years, and then during that time I eventually won Teenage California, Teenage America, then Mr. California. Then Bill sold that gym and moved to Oregon. And so then I opened up my own gym when I was almost 24 years old, still 23 years old. I was dating a girl whose father was an entrepreneur, and he taught me how to make a business plan. He taught me how to, create a prospectus and then solicit investment from investors. So I raised $115,000 from investors in $5,000 increments at 23 years old. But I was passionate about this. Yeah. And I would say that all the people who invested were not investing because they thought, oh, the gym business is known for being very lucrative.
They're investing in you.
They invested because they said, wow, it's only $5,000, and this kid is obviously dedicated and serious. So I opened up this gym in Old Town, Pasadena, and it took off like a rocket because the timing was good. The demographics were good, and there was very little competitors.
Pumping Iron came out in '83, and
Yeah,
78.
Bodybuilding was catching on.
Yeah.
And so everyone wanted to build muscle. And so I opened up what could have been described at the time as a kind of like a Gold's Gym meets Hard Rock Cafe.
Uh-huh.
Right? It was a very stylish gym. It was very clean and beautiful. Red equipment, gray upholstery, trees and ceiling fans and, beveled glass windows. And it was just beautiful. And it did very well for about 8 years. I stayed in business for 11 years, but 8 of the 11 years it did very well. But obviously it was a matter of time before LA Fitness, Family Fitness, Bally's, etc., realized that the demographics were very good for Pasadena. And so they're chain gyms, right? Which means that they offer low price memberships, multiple locations, more parking. And so it was impossible for me to continue after 11 years.
There again, Mr. California, Mr. American, Mr. Universe twice, gym owner, getting to hear a little bit of his backstory, and we got to the point where, as we saw the fitness industry, because I'm thinking as you're 23, then you're probably 32, and that part of the industry started being turned over to the Bally's or the Family Fitnesses of 24. Where did it take you? Did you sell the gym, Doug? You said you owned it for the whole time. What was your thought process then?
Well, I was the general partner of a limited partnership. So my limited partners, my investors, were uninvolved partners. So they got a percentage of the profit, which was a good percentage, between 18 and 22% annually, which is a really good return on investment. And then I started losing money. I couldn't keep up. I couldn't meet the expenses. And when that happens, you're in trouble because no one wants to buy a gym that's losing money.
Yeah.
Right. So I had to close it. And I had to basically relinquish my equipment and relinquish, my client list and everything else to satisfy the debt that I had accumulated in rent. And I walked away with nothing. And I'd spent a lot of my savings just trying to hold it over from month to month until I could find a buyer, and that didn't work. So I had no buyer and I had no savings.
Doug,
so it was a very, very bad time for me.
What did that make you feel like, Doug? Because you fell in love with fitness, then you fell in with the sport of bodybuilding, which we all did, and then you made a living, and then all of a sudden it came to an end. And I know you've obviously done well the rest of your life, but where did that put you as a young, because you're still young, you're still relatively young with this. Where did the head go? What happened?
Well, when I was 35 when I closed the gym, 1995, and I was really clinically depressed. When you get, I don't know if you've experienced it, but when you get depressed, you just want to crawl in a hole and hide.
Yeah.
You can't even socialize. You can't communicate with people. You feel very inadequate. I thought that all of my previous successes had all been just fluke.
For not.
That it wasn't me. It was just good timing.
So how did you pull out of that, Doug?
So I had to go see a doctor, and I started taking an antidepressant.
Wow, good for you.
And within about 6 months, I started feeling better, more productive, more outgoing, because I had to get a job, right? So I was hired by, at the time, a company called Sports Club LA, and you can't get clients unless you can talk to people.
Yeah.
Right. So the antidepressant helped with that, and then when you're working in a club, you're getting paid basically about a third of what the client is paying. 2/3 goes to the gym, partly for their profit, partly for their expenses. So I needed to get outside clients. So pretty soon I got more and more outside clients, and that caused me to have not enough clients to meet their criteria at the gym. So they said, you either got to do more sessions per week or go. I said, well, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting paid 3 times the money on the outside. So I just built the outside business. So about 10 years after I closed the gym and had been doing this personal training business, one of my clients, who was a banker, asked me if I wanted to join him in a lumber business in Nicaragua.
Okay.
I knew you were over in South America, but I wasn't sure where.
Central America.
Central America.
So I went down there for a week, and I checked out the situation, and I speak fluent Spanish because my parents are from Chile, South America. And so, I spoke to this person about, first of all, a salary, because, we're dealing with a third world country.
Yeah.
So some degree of corruption. And it's a question mark as to how much lumber can you get. And, he had a lumber buyer, a mahogany buyer, that was willing to buy as many as 30 containers a month. But when I went down there for the week, I discovered that the entire country doesn't export 30 containers of mahogany a month. So I said the entire country maybe exports half that. So there's no way that I'm not going to take, a salary first, and I'm going to work just based on commission. And so, and even still, that was a lot less money than I had been making as a personal trainer. So I went down there and I moved and I bought, didn't buy, but I rented a house. And I lived there for 2 years and worked in Spanish and came up 1 week every 3 months to just cover a few bases here and then went back. So that was only 4 weeks in LA a year. And so I kept, a small apartment, which allowed me to keep my car in a driveway, and I had, a small bed, and I had a computer and a phone and all that. So when I would come home, I wouldn't be without anything, right? So, and after 2 years, it didn't work anymore. We just couldn't get enough lumber. So my partner said, let's just pull the plug on it. Let's cut our losses. So I said, okay. And it was his investment, right? So he lost the money. I came back to LA and had to restart personal training from scratch.
At what age?
Which was not easy. That was at 37 years old.
37.
No, I'm sorry. It was 2000. So 45 to 47.
Yeah, I was thinking to be up
I was
there.
45 when I went down there.
So Doug, I'm thinking you're more of a personal restarter as much as you are a bodybuilder or fitness, because you have had success in restarting your personal brand, Doug Brignole. That's impressive, Doug. I think I'm sitting here because I did. Doug, I've never been insecure about my bodybuilding past. I always call myself the underachieving Mr. California. I think a lot of people call me that. I don't know. I remember Pete Grimkowski had a belt buckle inscribed for me, Mr. America, just filled in the date. And when I retired, I just, Pete goes, "You want the belt buckle?" I go, "No, I really don't." I'm hoping that bodybuilding can get in my rearview mirror and stay there, because it was a fun adventure and my career life. But as I'm sitting here and being a fan of yours, I've always been a fan of yours, Doug. I'm more of a fan sitting here today, knowing the overcoming that you have maintained in your life with a positive attitude. I had a heart issue about 3 years ago. I think I told you that, Doug. And I ended up with severe anxiety, and I didn't leave my house for a month. Mike knows that. And I'll never forget because I was always confident. I lost confidence in myself. It was an endeavor. And I remember when as I think maybe you spoke into your life, I remember my wife told me, "Tom, I need the old Tom back. I don't know when, but I want you to know." And you know what it gave me, Doug, is it gave me purpose. And that purpose gave me a little bit of passion to walk to the mailbox the next day. People were saying, "Tom, you'll be okay." And I just didn't think it in here. That's what
I felt when I lost the gym, yeah.
I was like, no one's living in my head. I've been confident and passionate, but right now, none of that. And so I slowly started the walk back, and so Mike can attest now that I think I'm doing more than I did back then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But Doug, there again, I'm impressed.
Well, when I went to Nicaragua to work in Mahogany, my job there was to find the mahogany, and so I had a team that I put together, and they were cutters, and then I hired a grader, and so then I would have the grader, separate the better grades from the lesser grades because our buyer wanted the better grades, and then I learned about international export, and all the documents you need, and mahogany is a semi-endangered species, and so it needs a certificate. It's called CITES, CITES, which is Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. So it's not expensive, but you have to have it, and you can only get it if you show that you got it in a sustainable manner. So I learned all of that, but I didn't know anything about lumber or mahogany when I went down there. And within a year, I could tell you what a mahogany tree looked like when it was standing. I could tell you what was a good grade or a bad grade. And then I had, in my Nicaragua, passed a new law. And the law was, they didn't like the idea that exporters were taking their raw material and sending it to another country, and then it was manufactured into furniture or doors there. So they said, we want you to manufacture it here. Well, you know, that's impossible. That's like going to a country that has rubber trees and then telling you must be in the tire business.
That's
You know, you don't know anything about manufacturing tires. You'd need a catalog. You'd need buyers, a whole different set of buyers. In furniture, you'd need, you know, a designer and a special equipment and special artists and all that. So they said, okay, well, we'll meet you halfway. What you need to do is take this board and you need to route the edge as if it's got, like, you know, a decorative routing, right? Well, that's nonsense, right? Because the buyer's not going to want that. And you go, well, I'm sorry, that's the only thing we'll let you do because we have to have you do something to the wood to meet this new rule.
Yeah.
And
Add
so,
value.
and here's the thing that got difficult was they said, and because it is no longer a board or a log, it now does not need a site certificate because that's the rule. The rule is if it's a furniture or a door, which is bizarre too, because you think, well, if you want to keep track of how much mahogany is being exported, and you don't know how much is being turned into furniture and then exported, and you really have no idea how much is being. And so I called all these different offices, and I came to the attention of the International Tropical Timber Organization, and turned out they invited me to write an article for their Tropical Timber Update, and invited me to be a speaker in the Netherlands at their convention.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, you know, here I knew nothing about lumber a year ago, and now I'm writing international articles on the subject and being invited to speak on the subject. So in terms of, you know, reinventor of your career, if it had been a lucrative career, I could have probably been one of the more knowledgeable people in the industry. And then I had to come back and start the personal training business all over again from scratch. I gave away all my clients when I left.
So Doug,
Yeah.
as we're kind of transitioning a little bit, I was waiting for an opportunity.
Okay.
There's a question we always ask every guest we have on our show, and that is, what is something most people don't know about you? And it doesn't have to be, you know, where's the hidden bodies or anything like that, but you know, something.
Well, I can tell you where they are.
Bodybuilding body.
Something like, you know, some of the guests said we're colorblind, or you know, I'm dyslexic.
Play the violin.
Right. Something simple, but.
Well, I mean, I think most people don't know that I was in the lumber business for 2 years.
Yes,
left
I
behind
didn't.
Yeah,
the fitness business.
I would have thought that would have been the thing, but
Yeah.
I know Tom's going to slap
Yeah,
me if I don't ask.
I don't play a musical instrument. I wish I did play the piano. I wish I played the violin actually too.
I can't anymore.
But no, I mean, there's no. I mean, I think I've been very, very lucky because I had good genetics for bodybuilding.
You did.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a very analytical mind, which has allowed me to dissect things and not feel attached to previous dogma. So I have no problem testing something that's very different from traditional exercise. And then at the same time, I'm also gifted in my ability to speak and write.
Yes.
I'm articulate. I love grammar. I love writing. And so that combination of loving bodybuilding, loving the science of bodybuilding, being very curious about the science of bodybuilding, having the curiosity and the free thinking of not being attached to previous dogma, and the ability to write and speak about it has allowed me to now basically reinvent.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I love. You know, Doug, and as you and I are sitting here, because, you know, we came from an industry, and I tell people, and I think you might fit into it, you may not, but I tell people all the time that I'm a jock on the outside, and I'm a nerd on the inside, because I love X's and O's.
Bodybuilder on the outside.
No way!
That's awesome, Tom. That's cool. I love that.
Because you know, I love. Doug, that is awesome. I love X's and O's, because when I was bodybuilding, and I was down at Gold's Gym, and I was around all the knuckleheads.
Do you mean ones and zeros, Tom? X's and O's is hugs and kisses.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Ones and zeros. Yeah, Yeah, he'll keep me straight. I'm getting old, Doug. So he's young whippers. No. But I remember when I would start leaving the gym, because you know the gym lifestyle, especially Gold's, Venice. You know that Muscle Beach scene. Everybody was working out, eating in the gym, laying out, tanning, going down, making some money, taking some photos on the beach, coming back, working out. I stopped doing that in the afternoon because I started getting an education. I started going to school, and people are always like, so what are you doing, Tom? And I go, I'm getting an education because I'm not sure this is going to last. And I was attracted. Right. I was attracted to that. So I tell people, I worked after the bodybuilding career. I was 16 years in the IT business, and and so it was kind of a good career. But it was just like you said. That's crazy, Doug. That's why I like you. We're the same. Jock on the outside, nerd on the inside. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, fast forward this because we are going to do another show just talking to the audience. A lot of the audience knows that we have Muscle Matters, and we're going to dig deeper into Doug with his thought process, with his analytical thinking, with his technique developing from a old school format when he was young to where he is now, writing 2 books. So we're going to dig into that on Muscle Matters. But take us up to, as you've recreated yourself after Nicaragua, you've come back because you picked up competing again. And that's always interesting to me because I've never really let go of fitness. I think when I first retired, I think I didn't want to touch a weight for like 2 or 3 years. I think that's normal to a lot of the guys because we did so much. But I've always had a love for fitness. But you actually said, I'm going to compete again. What was that decision like? Take us into that head.
Well, for one thing, I would say that it's been enjoyable for me. I've really liked the preparation. And you know as well as anyone that you work a little harder when you have a goal.
Yes, you do.
So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that, when I was in Nicaragua and I was able to clear my head, because at the time I went to Nicaragua, I was really burnt out with the fitness industry because I felt like the people that were making money were the people who were lying. About the science.
Yes.
Flat out. And the people that were not making money were the people who were telling the truth.
So true.
And so when I got to Nicaragua and I had some time to sort of rethink everything, I thought, well, there's got to be a market for revealing the fact that most of the information that we've learned about bodybuilding is wrong.
Yeah.
And bringing new information in there that is provably right.
Yes.
Provably right. Quantifiably right. So I started writing for Iron Man magazine then, and I started getting great feedback on my articles. My first article was called "The Case Against Overhead Presses."
I read that,
and I pointed out 5 things about the overhead press that are compromised. Either they increase the risk of injury, or they decrease the productivity, or they create the illusion that it's more productive than it is because you're lifting a heavier weight, but that doesn't mean that each of the participating muscles are actually getting loaded more. So then John Balick loved it, and he asked me to continue writing, and so I did, and the feedback I was getting was great, so I decided to write a book. So most people don't write a book until they've made a deal with a publisher. But I thought there's no way that a publisher is going to know what this book is about unless he has the manuscript. So I wrote it, and then I started seeking endorsements for the book. So one of the people that I sent the manuscript to was a guy named Wayne Westcott, PhD, professor of exercise science at Quincy College. He himself an author of 28 fitness books. Very well respected. So he loved it, which is saying a lot because most exercise physiologists are too proud to admit that something someone else is saying who doesn't have a PhD might be better than what they've been teaching. But he admitted it. So he said, listen, I'm going to refer you to my publisher because I think Jim Peterson would love this. It would be great for him and it would be great for you. So I went to Jim Peterson, and I gave him the manuscript, and he looked it over, and he agreed to publish it for 3 reasons. One was because he loved the table of contents. One was because I was a former Mr. America, Mr. Universe winner, so he thought that I could, that would help promote it and sell it.
Proof in the pudding.
And it was recommended by Wayne Westcott. Those are the 3 reasons. But he hadn't read it yet. Well, we signed the agreement, and he then started the process of editing it. And when he was done, he said to me, "Holy cow, this is the best book of any of the authors that I have ever had write books for me. And I've had over 100 of them."
I love it.
And he said, recently during an interview, he said, when I finished reading it, I was surprised, I was impressed, and I was ashamed. And I said, "Okay, so can you clarify?" He goes, "Well, I was impressed because it's very technical. I mean, you're not talking street language, you're talking science. I'm surprised because, you're not a PhD, and so you didn't come through the formal academic process, and rarely do you find someone that is this knowledgeable that doesn't have an academic trajectory." He goes, "And I was ashamed because I was the head strength coach for what's it called? The military academy, West Point."
Uh-huh.
He goes, "I taught all the great generals strength training, Petraeus and all the others." He goes, "And I taught them wrong. Had I known what I know now in this book, I would have trained them very differently." That's a hell of an endorsement.
It is. Congratulations to you, Doug.
Thank you. And he said, I'm more proud of your book than I am of any other book I've published, and it is already the highest selling book that I published. And if you go to Amazon.com, you'll see the reviews, and people are saying, "I wish this book had been around 30 years ago." It's so sensible. It's so logical. I mean, there's so many things that you just cannot deny. Yet, for whatever reason, it was never mentioned to the fitness audience. I'll give you just one example. If you look at a grandfather clock and you see that pendulum hanging vertically, and it's not, let's say it's not moving, it's just hanging vertically, the reason it's staying in that position is because that's the neutral position, right? So if you move it over to the side, it goes back to the neutral position. But when you move it over to the side, it returns with a certain amount of force. And that force is determined by 3 things: the length of that lever, the weight that's at the end, and the angle of that lever relative to the downward pull of gravity. So that means that when you lift the weight you're lifting isn't the amount of load your muscle is getting. It's one of the physics factors. Mm-hmm. But it depends on the length of the limb, it depends on the weight you're using, and it depends on the angle of that limb relative to gravity or relative to whatever other direction of resistance you might be using, based on either a cable or based on what's called friction force, which is if you push in a direction other than opposite resistance, because now you have a second point of contact. Now you're changing the direction of resistance, so you're changing what's called the resistance curve. So if you were to move that pendulum to a horizontal position, it would want to come down with more force than it would at a 45-degree angle. Now, in order to calculate the exact amount, you'd need trigonometry. But I don't want to complicate this thing too much. So what I say to people is, look, you know that this is 0 and this is 100%. So if you just figure that a 45-degree angle is a 50% lever, it's a good way to ballpark how much better the exercise can be if it was closer to horizontal. Okay, so you can just do that when you look at a person from the side doing a barbell squat, and you look at their lower leg, which is the limb that's being operated by their quadricep, and it only tilts forward 30 degrees. It's not even at a 45-degree angle, and certainly not horizontal, which means that they're getting a reduced percentage of the weight that they would be getting if they did allow their leg to get a horizontal. But you can't do that during a regular barbell squat.
I love that.
But you can actually do base.
I'm going to stop you because we are going to do Muscle Matters, and you've given people
Okay.
a great intro into Muscle Matters.
Yeah.
I'm interested already.
Well, that's the point, is that that's what changes the game now.
Yeah. So I want you to let our audience know we are coming back with a Muscles Matters with Doug. So Doug, you started competing again, started writing again. Have you found your love again for fitness? That's always a question I always talk to the guys, because you and I were young when we fell in love with fitness, I believe. I tell people I enjoyed exercising in the process. I got caught up in the industry, and the industry, which I tell people all the time, has got a dark underbelly. And I just said I got caught up in the industry. Hollywood chewed me up, spit me out, and I came back. So it took me a while to find the love for exercise. It took me a heart condition to find out I needed to venture a little deeper into, my fitness journey. And because, a lot of us weren't big cardio guys in the early days, but I have incorporated a lot of that more, and we'll talk about that more. Muscle Matters. But did you find your love again for the industry, and what was lacking in it?
I would say that I have not fallen in love again with the industry. I kind of hate the industry.
I know, we all have that.
Because 99% of the industry is full of people who are misinformed
Yes.
and speak as if they're fully informed.
Yes.
And if I say something that's completely opposite conventional wisdom, they just assume it's wrong because it's unconventional.
Yep.
And they won't even take the time to listen to what I'm saying and to realize the lack of logic
Yep.
that some of these exercises have.
Yep. Yep.
And so I don't love the industry. I love the science. And I love that I've discovered better and easier ways to get better results.
I love that, Doug.
So Doug, we talked about the books a little bit. Where would you like people to go to get a hold of your materials, your books, or more information on what you do?
Well, you can go to my website, DougBrignole.com. You can go to Amazon to get the book.
And
You can go to Smart Training 365.
and we will put up a copy of this on our show.
Okay.
In
You can go to
the
Smart
website.
Training 365. My partner Mo and I have created some tutorials and a trainer certification that people like watching videos more than they like reading, apparently. So
That's why we
Mo
do
made
this.
some very nice
Yeah.
videos. Yeah. So people like watching these videos, and we've broken it down into true bodybuilding and the Brig 20 and build and burn and programs that really do allow the viewer to understand what's better and why it's better. Well, I was on that Rick Drayson show for quite a while too.
Yes. Yes.
I was on Rick's corner, and Rick was a great guy, and he was a lot of fun to work with.
I loved Rick.
And that really helped me a lot in terms of building an audience. I had a heart problem also.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't have a heart attack, but I was getting a minor surgery on my back to fix herniated disc that was pushing against the nerve. And any surgery, they want you to do a medical exam ahead of time. And so I went to a cardiologist because he's a friend of mine, and he said, well, look, I see here on your family history that your father had heart disease. So you're 50. At that time, I was 57, I think. And he said, or 52. And he said, why don't we just do a calcium score? And that tells us how much plaque you have in your arteries right now. So then what he found out was that I had a lot of plaque in my arteries.
Significant.
And by the way, once that plaque is there, it's pretty hard to remove it. So that risk is still there, but I can certainly stop adding to it.
Amen.
Right. So what's weird is this cardiologist, these guys don't know diet.
That's true.
And so when I was doing my nuclear treadmill test, the tech people there said, be sure you eat a low-fat diet. That's the problem. A low-fat diet is the problem. So I said, well, obviously I'm here because I've been eating a low-fat diet. So thank you very much. But then I called my friend up, who's a biochemist, and I told him what was going on. And he goes, well, let me guess. You've probably been following the American Heart Association diet, food pyramid. And I said, yes. He goes, that is a recipe for a heart attack.
Isn't that crazy?
And the reason is because the base of the pyramid is complex carbohydrates, which are basically starches, high glycemic carbs. And the very top is fat. They want you to eat the smallest amount. So if you ate, let's say, a baked potato or mashed potatoes or pasta or pancakes or whatever, you're going to have an insulin spike. You would have less of an insulin spike if you ate more fat because it would slow down the absorption. But in the absence of eating very much fat, you get a more drastic insulin
That's
spike.
true.
And insulin creates cholesterol in your body. He said to me, 80% of the cholesterol you have in your body right now, you manufactured. You didn't eat it. He goes, so here's what I want you to do. For the next 3 months, I want you to eliminate all the starches. I want you to get all your carbohydrates only from vegetables. And I want you to add a ton of fats. Avocado, olive oil, coconut oil, egg yolks, beef, nuts, cheese. I want 40% of your calories coming from dietary fat, 30 from protein and 30 from low glycemic carbohydrates. Do that, get yourself retested again in 3 months, and let me know what it says.
What did it say?
So I did it. And before I did this thing, my cholesterol was 290 when I was eating low fat. When I did this thing, I was eating high fat and no starches. It dropped down to 138.
I love that.
So, I mean, if people don't know that you're manufacturing your cholesterol, how many people have died following the American Heart Association diet? It's ridiculous.
I love it. Well, lunch break, you're getting a taste of Muscle Matters here on lunch break, but you got to catch the whole show. Doug, we're going to sign off on lunch break. You've been a great guest. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, fantastic.
You've learned a lot, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm like clinging on to every word.
Yeah, because Mike started a fitness
And you're making
journey.
me hungry.
Yeah. So guys, lunch break. We're so glad you tuned in. We're going to be signing off, but you have to see Muscle Matter segment with Doug Brignole. We're going to talk a lot more about fitness and diet. Take care. God bless.
Bye.